This training is for employees of worker leasing companies, otherwise known as professional employer organizations or PEOs, with clients in Oregon. By the end of this training, PEO employees will be able to provide client proof of coverage, as well as update, terminate, and reinstate client proof of coverage as needed in Oregon using the appropriate forms. Welcome. The Worker Leasing Program thanks you for your interest in pursuing a license to lease workers in Oregon. This training will help you understand how Oregon differs from other states in filing and processing client proof of coverage when a worker leasing company carries the workers' compensation coverage for any Oregon client. You may be viewing this module because you're applying for a license, or you may be the person preparing and filing the required notices. Either way, you need to understand this unique Oregon requirement. We want you to have a clear understanding of how workers' compensation coverage works in a lease arrangement and what your obligations are so that you and your clients remain in compliance with Oregon laws and rules. To begin, let's make sure we're all on the same page with definitions. Worker leasing company, Oregon's term for professional employer organization or PEO. The term also includes certain commonly owned families of companies that are not PEOs but run employee payroll through a commonly owned parent company. Client or client employer, the company contracting with the PEO. For commonly owned companies, the client would be the company that has its employee payroll run through a commonly owned parent. Insurer or carrier, the workers' compensation insurance coverage provider. Coverage, workers' compensation insurance coverage. The worker leasing company or the client employer may provide the workers' compensation coverage for the client. In either case, the policy must cover all of the client's subject workers, leased and non-leased. Onboarding, the PEO's internal process for bringing on new clients. For commonly owned companies that don't do onboarding, this refers to adding a procedure to file notices if a new business is added or changed. Offboarding, the PEO's internal process for terminating client relationships. For commonly owned companies that don't do offboarding, this refers to adding a procedure to file notices if a business closes. In Oregon, either the PEO or the client can carry the client's workers' compensation coverage. Either way, the coverage must be a policy for the client's entire Oregon workforce, including both leased and non-leased workers. When the client carries its own coverage, the policy gets filed to Oregon electronically by the workers' compensation insurance carrier. There's nothing unique about that. However, more often than not, the PEO carries the client's coverage. When that happens, Oregon has special requirements for PEOs. We strongly advise that you make sure these required steps are incorporated into your written client onboarding and offboarding procedures to ensure that you and your client are compliant with Oregon laws. It's more than just a best practice. Violations of these requirements trigger civil penalties. Every resource mentioned in this training can be found on our website. To find our forms and other resources, go to www.wcd.oregon.gov. From the Workers' Compensation Division's homepage, locate the Employers section, then click on Worker Leasing. The left side menu provides specific sections within the Worker Leasing program. This training covers the forms and information found under the Client Proof of Coverage section. From here, you can access the 4 forms and the procedure guide mentioned in this training. The 4 forms you need to become familiar with are the Worker Leasing Notice, Form 2465, the Worker Leasing Update Notice, Form 3270, the Worker Leasing Termination Notice, Form 3274, and the Worker Leasing Reinstatement Notice, Form 5364. Before we dive into the specifics, it's necessary to clarify that you use these forms only when you carry the workers' compensation coverage for a client. Let's begin with the Worker Leasing Notice, Form 2465, which we often call a WLN. To complete this form, you take on the responsibilities usually reserved for your workers' compensation carrier. We know you are a PEO, not an insurance company. In addition, we know that most states require the carrier to file proof of coverage electronically on behalf of your client every time a policy is issued. However, in Oregon, this is not the case when the PEO carries the workers' compensation coverage for a client. In order for you and your clients to comply with Oregon law, the PEO must step into the shoes of an insurance carrier and directly file each client's proof of coverage with us. The filing is done for each client using the WLN. You must also send a copy of the WLN to your insurance carrier. This WLN must be filed within 30 days from the first day you provide coverage for each client in Oregon. When we get the WLN, our program will manually link the coverage between the PEO and the specific client. Once the WLN is filed, our system will show that a specific client is covered under your workers' compensation policy, and any claims will be directed to your insurance carrier. It's important that your PEO is diligent in filing all WLNs. A failure to file a WLN within 30 days is not only a violation that subjects a PEO to a civil penalty, it triggers an investigation of your client for lack of required proof of coverage. It can also delay the processing of an injured worker's claim. There's one other step you need to remember when you add a client to the PEO's workers' compensation policy. The PEO is responsible to provide each client with the Notice of Compliance posters and ensure the client prominently posts them in all worksite locations. This poster tells employees which insurance company carries their workers' compensation coverage. The poster is required in all Oregon workplaces. There's a section on the WLN form to remind you of this obligation. Since all clients with WLNs are covered under the PEO's policy, it's actually the PEO's poster that the client must post. We can provide you with copies whenever you need, but the actual poster isn't specific to the client and isn't updated unless the PEO changes the insurance carrier. Simply put, Oregon provides each PEO with a Notice of Compliance poster, Form 1188, when the carrier initially files the PEO's Oregon policy. Make copies and add this to your onboarding. You must provide each Oregon client with sufficient copies of this notice for posting in all worksites. Add a reminder to your offboarding as well to remind clients to take down the posters when the PEO no longer carries the coverage. By now, you should understand that client proof of coverage in a leasing arrangement doesn't get filed electronically. Instead, it's filed via a WLN and hand-entered by our staff. We also update client information by paper notice. Again, it's up to you as the PEO to get that information to us. Use Worker Leasing Update Notice, Form 3270, to send us updated information. For example, if one of your clients moved locations or added a new assumed business name or DBA, you need to let us know by using this form so we can update the client's information in our system. To avoid civil penalties, you must file this form within 30 days of the effective date of a change or from when you first know a correction is needed. At times, PEOs need to terminate their responsibility to carry the workers' compensation coverage for a client and end claims liability. This doesn't necessarily mean your client terminated its contract with you. Although that might be the case, it could be that your client decided to purchase direct coverage or is a national client that no longer has Oregon employees. Whatever the reason may be, the only mechanism to terminate coverage is to file a termination notice, Form 3271. Here's the tricky part. No matter when you want the termination to be effective, your liability cannot end sooner than 30 days from the date we receive the termination notice. If you know in advance a client will no longer need Oregon coverage, you can send the notice early to get the clock running on the 30 days. You should also send the termination notice to your client's last known address and to the insurance carrier. It's important to have good communication with your client so you can promptly file the termination notice to end your claim's liability. Remember, you may be liable for client claims if you fail to file a termination notice to close out your Oregon coverage obligation. You can also be subject to civil penalties for filing the notices late. Last but not least, let's talk about the Worker Leasing Reinstatement Form. Reinstatements are needed when you want to reinstate your coverage obligation for a previously filed WLN that was terminated. It could be that you previously filed a termination notice in error, or maybe your client changed its mind and remained on your payroll after you had already sent in the termination. In any event, once coverage is terminated, it will show in our system as canceled. The only mechanism to reinstate the coverage and close a coverage gap is to file the reinstatement form, Form 5361. By now, you may be experiencing information overload. Please don't worry. The Worker Leasing Program team is always happy to answer questions. We are here to support you and your clients through education. You may also use Bulletin 273 and the Procedure Guide as references for developing a good internal procedure to ensure ongoing compliance. On behalf of the Worker Leasing Program, thank you for your interest in doing business in our beautiful state. We want to hear from you and welcome your feedback as we continue to carry out the Department of Consumer and Business Services mission to protect consumers and workers while supporting a positive business climate. If you have questions, you can email or call us. Use these links or those listed below in the video description to find the resources we mentioned in today's training.